Okay, hi there everyone, and welcome to today's University Business Web Seminar. It's great to have you all with us. My name is Kurt Ozzie-Durley. I'm the Web Seminar Editor here at UB, and I'll be your host and moderator. The title of our event, as you see here, is Predictive Analytics and the Future of Enrollment Management, and it is being brought to you through the generous support of our sponsor for today, Rapid Insight. First off, as members of our audience are still coming in here, a bit of background about our topic and what we'll be taking a look at here today. Data-driven enrollment management has become the standard in higher ed, but many institutions are still only beginning to realize the potential of predictive analytics, which can enable institutional leadership to strategically improve everything from incoming class headcounts and academic quality to diversity KPIs and financial aid outlays. Today we're going to learn more about predictive analytics and the future of enrollment management. We're joined by the Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management at Arkansas State University, who will discuss how he brought his deep background in data-driven enrollment to campus, highlight the transformative impact his work has had on student retention, and provide strategies for using predictive analytics more effectively at any institution. We're looking forward to a very interesting and useful presentation and discussion here. Plus live Q&A. We welcome your questions, so do stay tuned. We'll get started in just a minute or two here. But before we do, just some quick housekeeping. First off, as it says here, for tech support, you can feel free to use the chat panel at the right side of your screen. Just select the name of our event host, Jason York. He's our producer, and let him know if you're having any technical problems. He'll be able to help you out. Also, second item here, as it says, if you don't have any computer speakers, or if you have any trouble with your computer speakers, we'll post the phone number and access code that you can dial in that chat window at the right side of your screen there. If you want to get audio access over the phone at any time, you can dial those numbers and listen in over the phone. As I said earlier, we welcome your questions. If you have a question at any time, please feel free to submit it in the Q&A, bottom right-hand corner there. Note that's not the chat, but reserve questions for the Q&A. Just make sure it's set to all panelists, like it says on the slide here. We'll get to as many questions as we can when we get to the Q&A at the end of today's webinar. So once again, if you have a question, feel free to fire away. Just type it in that Q&A, bottom right-hand corner. Also, speaking of questions, we are commonly asked about accessing the presentation at a later time. Last item here, as it says on the slide, everyone who registered or attended here today will be receiving a follow-up email later on with links to where you can find both the slides and the archive recording. We are recording here, and it'll be archived on the UB site. So you'll be able to go back over the presentation at your own pace. If you want to review anything, you can also share with anyone on your team, any of your colleagues at your institutions. So don't worry about that. Okay, so with that, I'm very fortunate to introduce our panelists here today. As I said earlier, Brian Terry is the Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management at Arkansas State University. We're also joined by James Cousins. He's Analyst Manager at Rapid Insight, and it's great to have them both with us. We're looking forward to a very interesting presentation here. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to James Cousins from Rapid Insight, who's going to start us off with some introductions and a bit about our agenda for today. So with that, James, welcome to our webinar.
Thank you, Kurt. And thank you, everybody, for making the time to join us today for our presentation. Worked with Brian Terry a lot in the past, and through that and some prior experience, have really seen a lot of transitions in enrollment management, a lot of which pointing to the power that predictive analytics can offer as we all move forward. So my name is James Cousins, as was mentioned, and I'll be introducing here Brian Terry in a moment. I did want to include the description just for the purposes of recording, people receiving the slides, that kind of thing. You can always come back to this, but our goal today is to keep the presentation very tightly focused to what we said we would deliver. So first we'll Brian Terry and I will explain why we're here in the sense of, why we're excited to give this presentation, why we work in enrollment. Then we'll be talking about these specific topics of, admissions, this early stage of the enrollment cycle, enrollment management, more referring to the application or the admit to yield phase, talking about student success, which I'm not sure if that surprised anybody, but it's very, very relevant. And then, of course, nurturing a data-driven culture. Before we do get into any of those topics, first, I will let Brian Terry give you a bit of background.
Good afternoon, my good friends and colleagues. Looking over the attendee list, I see that there's 115 of you, so I understand that this is a very important topic, so I'm glad to be able to offer my advice and work with James on some of the things that we're doing here at Arkansas State. I know that many of you are anxious to get to the nuts and bolts of how the predictive modeling software works. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do things here at Arkansas State, and I'll sprinkle a few things in from some other institutions. I've been using this particular product since like 2007 and really have enjoyed it. Like the slide says, I've been in some form of enrollment management for over 27 years. I started off in financial aid, and like many financial aid folks out there, I believe that the only reason students wanted to come to school was based on money. It wasn't until I started working more with admissions data that I began to realize that there were many more reasons why a student picked a school or did not pick a school. Over the years, I watched parents who would clearly go into deep, deep debt for their little darlings in order to get them to go to their school of choice. I think we all kind of remember those days. But, as times have changed and the economy has fluctuated, I think what I've seen most in my recent positions is a much more price-sensitive population. Unless the school is a first choice, students, often to the delight of their parents, are perfectly willing to go the transfer route or the online route, which is taking students away from us face-to-face institutions. I think we're all seeing that, as well as the political climate, where we're starting to see more and more dollars go to the two-year schools, vocational, technical, and community colleges, and those dollars are going there much more than they are going to the four-year colleges and universities. Bottom line, as enrollment professionals, our messaging needs to be something that we are working with our marketing departments, and speaks to more than just getting into college, but also graduation. So it's a bigger deal than what it used to be. A little bit about Arkansas State. We are a Carnegie Research II institution in the NCAA FBS Division I. Wolves up to all my friends out there at Arkansas State. What that means is if you look at both Carnegie status and our NCAA status, we are ranked in the top 10% of all schools that have both. We are the second largest university in Arkansas. We are a leader in health sciences and research. We have the New York Institute of Technology actually has a campus on our campus, and they host the state's first osteopathic medical school. We've got a nationally ranked school of nursing, and we have the ABI, which is our Arkansas Biosciences Institute, which is really kind of a public-private partnership where we have businesses that come and work with us and work with our students on a lot of different things, mostly in the sciences. One of the things that we do, which makes us an educational innovator, is that we operate the first U.S.-style residential campus in Mexico. It's been in the news a lot lately. It's doing really, really some cool stuff down there, taking the Arkansas State brand down to Mexico. We are the largest provider of 100% online degree programs in the state of Arkansas. We've got about 90,000 alumni, and a high percentage of those students are first-generation graduates. We have something that I think is very, very unique on this campus called Created State, and if you haven't gotten a chance to see it, I really suggest that you go out there and look at it. It gives our undergraduate population the chance to do undergraduate research during that first year, and the students are just really, really enjoy it, and it's a very neat product. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more, but I'll kick it back to James for now, and James, you can take over.
Sure. And I have to say it's really a privilege to be presenting alongside Brian. My own experience is more modest, but it primarily because that early part of Brian's journey, he was mentioning the sort of about face that he had when he was learning more about the enrollment and the admissions process. That was something that I, relatively more recently went through. I was working in institutional research, and during that process of what I thought was just sort of a way to use my background, I discovered a lot about the actual value to colleges for the people that they serve, but also to the processes that they have to go through to ensure successful operations. So as far as why I'm excited to present about this topic is because, effective enrollment management is it's not just sort of getting as much as you can for as little as you can. I had learned that it's really about making sure that the institution has a firm footing for its ability to provide the formative experience that is higher education, that it should be. So just a tiny bit about Rapid Insight. I think that really the most significant aspect of our background, that we've been doing this for quite a while, and that our entire mindset as a company is providing our customers, our users, with a tool that they can use to build in-house capacity. So there are a lot of nice features that make it very usable, and we'll get into that. But we pride ourselves on the partnerships that we have with our customer users and the support that we offer. It's that exact relationship that put us in this position to present with Brian, and to that effect, I will let him start to talk about the things that you all wanted to hear.
So I bet one of the pressures that some of you are facing is how much of the recruiting budget should you be allocating to different populations. If you are one of those states who's expected to lose high school graduates, you're probably being told on a regular basis that, you should be going to state X because they have more students. Well, be careful. Arkansas is not unlike many of the states around the country. I bet we have our admissions folks out there listening all the time. My daughter doesn't get anything from your school, or my son is being inundated with stuff from school X. Here in Arkansas State is on the northeast side of the state, while the University of Arkansas is on the northwest side of the state. So while University of Arkansas tends to get many more students from Texas and Oklahoma, our out-of-state territory is really Tennessee, southern Missouri, and Mississippi. One of the kind of neat things is the state of Arkansas has about the same number of people as the city of St. Louis. We actually looked that up. So we seem fairly big on the map, there's just not a lot of people here. So, and one of the problems is to the southeast of us is an education desert. That whole area is called the Delta, and it's a lot of low-income areas and very few four-year universities. As a result, the college-going group is also not very strong. In fact, although the graduation rate is actually rising here in the state of Arkansas, the college-going rate has dropped from just over 62% 10 years ago to under 50% this past year. So what you have is two big state schools along with 17 or 18 community colleges all going after a shrinking college-going group. So using data to really focus on where you should be recruiting and spending those dollars becomes even more important. So you have to kind of ask yourself, do you have the people to handle an out-of-state student campaign? And if not, what are you going to do? Some of the things that we've done here at Arkansas State, that some of you I'm sure have done, is we've worked really hard to form an alumni admissions partnership where for those out-of-state programs we've worked with our alumni to have them adopt a high school. That has been very, very effective, not just out of state, but also downstate or the middle of the state. We've gotten a lot more students from areas that we haven't gotten in before, and we're pretty excited about that. But the truth is, most of us don't have unlimited budgets, and money is an absolute issue. I had an alum come up to me at a recent college fair to inquire about whether or not she could get paid to become a recruiter. This particular alum was actually working for the for-profit sector, and while she didn't say that she was recruiting per head, she also didn't say that she wasn't. So, it's a lot of things are going on. It's not just about people, it's about money, and it's about time and bandwidth. It's no secret that the online programs have a plethora of people doing the follow-up, and we hear often that, well, I didn't finish my application and nobody would call me back, and so I decided to go online because they got back to me right away. Well, time is important, and you kind of have to make that decision on, do you have the bandwidth to cover all of these new areas that you want to cover? So that's the other piece that's very, very important. And while all of these strategies are important, we're going to switch again in 2025 when the high school graduate number starts to level out. We need to be prepared for an even rockier road in the admissions world. I mean, we're talking about removing barriers like, is the ACT or the SAT really valuable? We've got schools now, four-year schools, moving to test blind option. I didn't think I would ever see that as a four-year institution. I thought we'd always have some form of testing, but now that there's test blind options out there, it really is going to be something that we're going to have to work on and understand what's happening out there in the market. So, speaking of the market, what is your competition doing? If you're starting to see out-of-state students going into one of your competitors, you got to start asking the question, why? Is it your programs? Are you managing your programs, your distinctive programs, better than you are your regular programs? Out-of-state students don't need to come to an institution when their in-state institutions offers the same programs. How are your scholarship dollars for out-of-state versus in-state? What's your marketing like? Something I've noticed that I've seen here lately is the virtual tour. Everybody's got lots of folks have a version of a virtual tour, and we always thought, well, our international students will like this. But interestingly enough, those online institutions where students may never walk on campus, they've got a really nice virtual tour of what their campus does look like. And so once you see that, you've got to be prepared for this is going to be very, very difficult. And the other thing is review the out-of-state markets where you are recruiting. And I can't say this enough. Leadership is about the ability to say no. And I can just tell you, I was at an institution where we recruited in California we were well outside of California, but we recruited in California every year. And I asked why, because I had only seen a grand total of 5 applications over a 10-year period. Well, it turns out we had 2 students the same year enroll. One of them was an athlete, and the other used to live in the state where we were recruiting from. So sometimes you just have to be able to say no so that you can focus on your own group. Again, I cannot emphasize the amount of effort it's going to take from admitting a student until enrollment. It's not about changes to the NACAC rules, although they do mean something to many of us. For those of us who have been doing this a long time, candidly, it's pushing us into some ethical decisions we've never had to make. But I will say this. Many schools have been recruiting these students well after the student has committed to our institution. I mean, we just need to be candid about that. Every time I watch a ball game, I see either some online commercial come on specifically going after my students. I can remember a time when you never saw higher education even televised, do a commercial. Now you see it almost every time you watch a ball game, and really throughout prime time. You need to make sure that communication plan that you have goes at least through when the student enrolls, and also making sure that those communication is going through the first year. We've started doing a lot more of that, following that student through that first year. So we want to remind them this is the reason that you picked us, because some of these students are going to struggle. On the predictive analytics side, I believe in the bell curve. To the right of the curve, these students are coming no matter what. I think we've all seen how sometimes we've treated certain students and they still come because they have that kind of loyalty to the institution. On the left side of that bell curve, these are students who, no matter what we do, they're not coming. But how much time do we spend with that population of students who, when we know they're not coming? You know, we have a gut feeling, but we don't know for sure. The bell curve helps us work with that, and that's kind of why we like Rapid Insight. We simply don't have a ton of money to spend on those real, expensive products out there. And I got to tell you, some of those really expensive products are very sharp, and they can do some things really well. But for the money, and especially if you're really just starting off in predictive analytics, we really like the Rapid Insight product. The product helps us understand who our middle is, and gives us ways to reach out to them. So take a look at this slide. On the left side where it says great fits, these are probably students that my admissions officers just need to make sure that they keep in touch with. These are the students that we talk about how great college is and how much fun that they're going to have. And for the most part, these are Red Wolves, as we call them here. These are Arkansas State Red Wolves and have been Red Wolves for a long time. The right side of the group talks about poor fits, but I'm not really going to call them that. These are just harder to convince kids. You got to start early with them. They often have a lot of schools courting them. I like to give these students to faculty early in the process to say, hey, this is going to be a tough person to get to, but if they know that there's going to be undergraduate research, if they know that they're going to be working with faculty, we may have a better shot at them. But really, that middle is the spin sitter group. We have teams of financial aid and admissions people who go out and talk to the dark blue crowd. We're trying to move them over into the great fits, those and the middle students. Financial aid is a big population for that middle kind of lighter blue, and then the powder blue group. Those are the ones, again, we kind of move towards faculty and have faculty give them a conversation to, because they're going to need somebody other than the rah-rah group that's going to talk to them. So the reason we do some of these things is because time is critical. I talked a little bit earlier about, how much time do we spend on a group of students that really aren't coming here. We use this product to kind of say, let's focus on this population of students, because that's going to make much more sense. Another one of the reasons that we've always switched to this product is the ease in which you can review your data. Now, if you're a large school who has an institutional research program that's dedicated to analytics, well, I'm jealous. We don't have that here at Arkansas State University, although we're working for it. Rapid Insight allows us to take stock of our data, and as you can see here, this is one of the chart below is actually a full page, but I just kind of took a few things out of there. I used to work at an institution in North Carolina where the state had a mandate that came down that started basing budgets on things like enrollment, retention, and graduation for rural populations. I think that's going to be, if it's not already a trend, I think we're going to start to see even more of that. As you can see here, the software keys you to an element that might be necessary for your state one day. Here at Arkansas State, we haven't been looking at urban and rural indicators, and so we didn't mark it in our system, and as a result, we had missing data for 5,618. But what is neat about it is distance from campus. When people say, well, when people start to ask you the question, how many, where do people enroll from? You can say our radius is about a 92-mile radius. And those, again, from an enrollment management point, these are all things that you need to understand. Who is your population? Where are they going? And looking at this kind of data, you can say, okay, this is what I need to do. Or as you're building your process for upcoming years, you can say, this is what I need next. Finally, many of the institutions do a great deal of work with data on predicting how well a student does on the way in. We know what their high school grade point average is, their test score, their academic rigor, but how often do we see students dropping out based on financial need? You've got to ask yourself, does your student success model even look at need past the first year? We started looking strong at, micro grants are the real thing new thing out there, but offering those kind of incentives up front can also help. It can help with retention. There's a lot of our own data shows us that, hey, are we paying attention to students on that last year, if you will, on that second year or that third year, who all they need is 500 here or all they need is 1,000 here to get us past that mark? Well, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than trying to give a person a full ride up front. So pay attention to those kind of things on the student success side. I don't think we do nearly enough of that kind of work in our institutions, and so we're trying to help with that. We're trying to help our financial aid office understand that. It goes without saying that enrollment management impacts everything. Take a look at all of your data. It's just one of those things. If you're not collecting it, you might. Working with Rapid Insight, we've been able to identify easy wins. We can collect these things through the application. Somebody probably on campus are collecting these things that are not going to not only enroll those students, but also make those students succeed and help them through graduation. And the other thing is, listen to everything, but just back it up with data. Especially when you're starting a new position, you're going to get a lot of advice. I like to say that we're a lot like coaches in enrollment management. Everybody has an idea on what you should be doing to get more students in, and oftentimes it's anecdotal. It's I talked to my daughter and her friends, and School X is coming here often, and you guys need to go out there. Well, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not saying that personal touch doesn't help, but it's not going to help all students, and you just have to understand that. There's too many polls out there that are talking about students aren't picking up your phones. They'll listen to a text, they'll do those kind of things, but some students just really don't want to talk to you. Video chatting, things like that, they will work with you on, but you have to do what's right for your thing and back it up with data. And I can't stress enough, invest in predictive modeling, because the predictive modeling stuff will tell you this is a population that you have a chance with, while the other population you're going to have to still stay in contact with. Work really hard on making sure that you're working with students that you actually have a chance on. The other thing that I will say, and this will be the last thing I'll say, is learn how to address the "but the data says" moments with your colleagues. You're going to find that everybody on campus is data driven. Everybody talks about, oh, here's what the data says. They've done their own data. They've done something else. They've done this. They've done that. I worked with an institution that had a 5-year run of around 75% retention rate. They did their own predictive model, and without changes to any of their admission standards or their academic advising, they were predicting a 95% retention rate. Sometimes you just have to say that's obviously not the case, and being able to use a product that is simple to use like Rapid Insight is going to be very crucial for, I think, all of us. I'm going to kick it back over to James now, who's going to actually show you how this product works. James?
Thanks, Brian. And I want to say how much I appreciate some of the little tidbits that were mentioned, and hopefully we'll reflect those here as we talk through the actual software, that the Vera platform. But just to provide an initial orientation and then to reinforce Brian's points through the actual product, I wanted to give you a sense that this idea of being able to assess the impact of your admissions efforts, your recruiting efforts, as in the case of the in-state or out-of-state, or other initiatives that you have, even down through to the admit side, and figuring out who really needs outreach and who you might be able to sway towards that good fit category. It involves gathering as much data as you're able to gather, with the confidence of being able to explore it, blending that all into a single source there, as you can see with the data preparation step. And from there, a lot of the upper level insights that Brian was mentioning that you can really, really easily act on, that is a result of predictive modeling. And I'll be the first to say that there are a lot of ways that you can accomplish that, but I'm looking forward to showing you the way that Vera Predict can help with that. And as far as the data destinations go, enrollment management it's definitely not a one-person effort, and it's definitely not an effort that's comprised of people who all think exactly the same way. So outputting your data, being able to take these results and share them in whatever format allows you and your team and your institution to act on them most effectively, that's really what it's all about. And so to that end, I will just mention that we freely encourage any and all questions that people might have. We really look forward to even the challenging ones there. But I am going to go ahead and start to show you a little bit about what this process looks like in action. So I'm just going to focus a little bit more closely on making sure that I share with you all the right thing. And then one more application here. Okay, so we're all set. So here again, being able to be responsive and to identify the strategies that will help your specific institution navigate, the admissions, the enrollment landscape more confidently with a clear view of your data. That's what Vera Construct is all about. So you can see here, just on this interface to give you an idea, you have the option to set up workflows, you have the option to set up connections. A major part of what's been changing, the future aspect of the enrollment management, is that you need to really incorporate all of the systems that you have, so that if you're looking at an enrollee, rather, it's optimistic of me, if you're looking at an admit or if you're looking at a prospect or an inquiry, you need to be able to align all of your resources to get the best view of that student. So if you need to reach out to a student information system, flat file, other proprietary sources that you have, you can build those connections. And then once you're able to do that, you can start to set up a workflow like this one. And I'll keep things very, very focused on the actual practical side of things. And so in my work with Brian, and rather in Brian's work that I am sometimes able to contribute to, it basically boils down to this, is being able to pull in the resources that you have. So, add in years of application data or pull it from your student information system, to combine those years of data, filter down, if you need to look at your in-state population to make sure that you have a clear handle on that, or your out-of-state or your financial aid recipients. These are all things that you can do very easily with a workflow like this. And again, it isn't critical out of any effort that it does follow this interface, but what this enables is for more people on the admissions team, regardless of their background, to substantially contribute to the effort of improving admissions and enrollment and even student success down the line. So keep things on track here. What I'm going to do here is show you that whenever you need this to run, you can schedule this to run multiple times a day through your admissions lifecycle, or you can just build your modeling file. What this is doing is it's looking at historic data, their application details. It's supplying extra information like financial aid or maybe even campus visits, and then it's creating this file that you can use for predictive modeling. And so this is the next step, is really digging into what is driving your admits and your prospects to either apply or to go on to enroll. And that's where Vera Predict comes in. And I mentioned that predictive modeling is the key. It's not necessarily the case that you have to use this, but I'd like to point out that when you do use this tool for predictive modeling, all that you need to do is open up the file that contains your data. So this is entirely based off of your institution and your students and their unique patterns. So if I open this modeling file, what it's going to do is it's going to load that, and it's going to start to tell me a lot about my students or my admins. For people that are very statistically inclined or have that skill set in their office, you can go through and you can look at the correlation matrix. You can run means analyses or perform clustering if you would like. For a lot of people, though, it's already tight enough of a cycle. You don't really have too much time to be going back and forth. If that describes you, or if that just happens to be where you're at, you can identify, for instance, that you're interested in predicting enrollment. And once you choose that, it does a couple of things for you. And just to emphasize how pleasant this makes the exploration process, you can see here on the left, it's gone ahead and eliminated any of the fields that are not statistically significant, meaning that in your effort to stay competitive, if you finally get event attendance information pulled into your data set, or if you start to use things like how far in advance they apply or how far away they live, this is a resource that makes it very possible to test as many hypotheses as you have. I was working with one particular school, and they actually went from, in the year, in 1 year, building a model based off of, I think it was somewhere between 15 and 20 variables that they had in mind. Once they had started really getting into it, they had 256 variables. It was literally, or perhaps literally, everything that they knew about their admits, and they wanted to see what was predictive. So they just built automatically, something that you're able to do here, and then it provides the best model that it can possibly build on your data. And there are all sorts of details I'd be happy to answer questions on. I do want to keep things moving along, though, because the strategic value of this is that if you are struggling with reversing a trend in your enrollment or with understanding what is working during your admissions life cycle, this gives you a clear view of, for instance, people who live nearer to you being more likely to enroll. And maybe that's not actually new. If that lines up with an expectation that you had, then this may be simply helpful confirmation, but there might be other things that are surprising, things like particular academic departments being, in this case, unfortunately, not a contributor to enrollment likelihood. And so this might be the sort of thing that you would want to investigate more closely or consider, I guess, more heavily with your team. So with this model built, what you're able to do is act on it. And that's really the most important piece. So if you were to take this model, and I've done this ahead of time, as you might understand, you can incorporate this into really whatever your admissions efforts look like. So in this case, one of the basic goals is just looking at admits, and you'll just notice this is just the next step in the process. This is something that a user would develop, and I can just import my scoring model. So it's a very straightforward process, and if I were to pull in that fall enrollment model, it's going to create these nodes. These are basically placeholders. If I do open it up, you'll see that it is just the equation that we've just built, but the nice thing is that you don't need to do that for yourself. There's no need to code that. What you can do is you can just have this run or run on a scheduled basis so that you have a list of all of your students, again, optimistic, all of your admits, and how likely they are, if I parse down here, how likely they are to become a student. So this person has a 60% likelihood. This person has a 7% likelihood. Apologies to anybody. The screen is maybe a little bit small. But this resource, this can fold into however your office prefers to use it. So as an example, if you want to build a contact list and you want to push that out to Vera Bridge, for instance, a cloud-based dashboarding solution, I could send this directly to any advisor who's trying to interact with their students without the hassle of requesting data sets or rerunning, maybe legacy reports. You also have something like a report that's a little bit more statically driven. So I'm going to run this job. And then just to give you an idea of what is possible and, hopefully plant the seed of what you would be able to do with this resource, I'm just going to pull up Vera Bridge. And as a reminder, I will be, there we go. Excellent. We'll be turning to questions here soon after offering some takeaways. So keep those coming in if you do have them. But this is just one example of how you might use it. So this is Vera Bridge, and inside of this, there is a list of scored incoming applications. You can see I just updated it and republished it. So now when I open it up, here we go, I can start to take a look at what my application pool looks like. So as an example, how many do I have broken down by each likelihood category? And as Brian said, if you want to start to drill into that group that is maybe likely to enroll with a nudge to really target your efforts, I could go ahead and filter that. So these highly likely, these great fits, or these incredibly unlikely to enroll, maybe I could just look at these individuals. And then if I go ahead and break that down by how many are in state, or for instance, how many might be legacy students, I have a lot of choices here. And what's really nice is that I can go straight into it and see exactly who these out-of-state legacy students are. I might really want to make sure that I reach out to them. So here, as an advisor, as someone more in the position of Brian Terry, for instance, anyone can come in and they can see exactly who these potential students are. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. You can add this to a dashboard so that it becomes a strategic staple. You can sign in and you can see what the data looks like, since this will dynamically update whenever the data is refreshed on a scheduled basis, anything along those lines. But for the time being, however, I will go about sending it back to, let's see. Oh, I apologize. It's the whiteboard, I think. Oh, I can just stop sharing these applications. I apologize for the technical ramblings here. I just want to, there we go. Head back to the PowerPoint. And so with that, I just wanted to sort of cap off the demo. And before I hand things back over to Brian and the audience with questions, I just wanted to mention that anyone, if they liked what they saw specifically on the software side, or even if you want to keep the conversation going about some of the initiatives Brian mentioned, you can request a free demo at any point in time or visit our website and learn more. With that, though, I am happy to turn things over to questions.
Great. Thanks so much, James. And yes, to our audience, James and Brian have both been so kind as to provide their email addresses here. If you have further questions for them after today's webinar. Also, if you'd like to learn more and to get a personalized free demo of the Vera platform, you can go to the URL on your screen there. But for now, if you have any questions for now's your chance. Once again, a couple of reminders. Feel free, if you have any questions, type in the Q&A, bottom right-hand corner there. We'll get to as many as we can. Also, if you are interested, we will be sending out a follow-up email, once again, to everyone who registered or attended here today. If you want to go back over the slides, I know there was a lot of great information contained in there. We kind of had to go through it quickly. Also, we are recording, and this will be archived on the UB site, so you'll see a link in there where you can go back over it. And if you want to review or share with anyone on your team, you'll be able to do that. Let's see, first question for you, Brian, came in right at the end of your presentation. It says, so do you have a predictive score for each prospect and a set of recommendations for next actions based on that score? And how many factors are needed to create a score?
Well, I can answer the first part of the of the question, which is, do you have a factor? I think James showed that percentage on the thing comes up for each student, and it goes as far as to say this person is going to enroll, this person might enroll with a nudge, and this person is not going to enroll. Again, the person, depending on what comes up, what percentage comes up, that's how we'll decide how we should attack them. And so, if we have a student who has, we've got a lot of first generation students, so we know that once that student is excited, but also has a lot of financial aid or financial need, if you will, we'll make sure that person talks to an admissions and financial aid counselor before they talk to a student, just to make sure that they have all of their financial aid questions answered so they feel a comfort level. Then we'll move them on to a student and let the student deal with them. As for the second part of the question, James, I think that's you.
Yeah, just to review, James, the follow-up was how many factors are needed to create a score. I guess asking, is there a minimum number of factors, or how does that work?
I think a lot of people are surprised both by the minimum and also the maximum. We've had schools, especially at the prospect stage or the inquiry stage, if you're trying to tailor the admissions that you do in terms of especially the list purchases or how many names you are getting, a lot of times all you really know, potentially the only thing you know about an inquiry, is which list they came from as far as a predictive ability. And so you can build a model even on that sole factor just to try and figure out how you might optimize the earliest stage of the admissions process. But then on the upper side, you can use, honest to goodness, you can use as many as you like, and the process is remarkably effective at sifting through what is related and what's not related, and more than that, what are the strongest predictors that from the list you've provided. So as little as one in some cases, depending on what you're hoping to discover.
Okay, wow, great. Thank you. Another one for you, James, just kind of a direct question asking, how does this program or platform differ from others on the market, and is this all specific to higher education?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because I've had several years to learn how to answer it effectively. And I think the most consistent differentiator, because there are some products that do particular elements or perform particular functions incredibly well. I think one of the biggest things that we're the most proud of is the support. That said, it's as good or better than any predictive model that our customers have built. So it really is incredibly easy to use. I could tell you that it's easier to use than any other product, but out of respect for the audience, it is incredibly easy to use. The models are very accurate. They allow for complete interaction. So it's not telling you what should be used or needs to be used. It allows you, even without a statistical background, to really dive into the model and see exactly what's going on. So it's more transparent than a lot of competing solutions. And as far as the higher education specificity, we are, again, really proud of the background that we have in higher education. It's often the case that, when Brian picks up the phone, instead of having to establish context and explain what it means that somebody's a prospect or an inquiry or melt and yield, that's the language that we speak with a lot of our customers. And so we really like to get right up to speed whenever customers call in and have, seek advice or questions. I guess one final thing, given our background in higher education, is that in some cases we've even been able to go as far as providing or offering solutions with our product that cut the time to implementation down to, without exaggeration, as little as a single hour before you can be building predictive models. We have what are called quick starts, and for a lot of users, for a lot of institutions that are finding themselves, for instance, in February needing to build a predictive model so that they can, do as much as they need for their admission cycle, the enrollment cycle, you can be up and running with the model by the end of this week.
Okay, sure. That's great. Wow, thank you. Let's see, I'll go back to Brian for this next question. It says, how did you determine which students benefit most from which type of outreach? For example, faculty, is there a dependent variable?
So we look at a lot of those different things, and one of the things that James, one of the things we tried to show was that stair step. If you'll remember, the group that's very likely to come in, and then on the right side there was the tougher students. We basically broke it into deciles, and those students that were 7, 8, and 9, or 8, 9, and 10 rather, those are the students that we said, look, we can get, these are students we can get. We don't have to work really, really hard because they're probably coming. And I will tell you, some of the things that we tracked was, did they come to an event? Those kind of things. On the other hand, we looked at a lot, and I'll be honest with this group. This was our first year of Common App, so we're very excited to see how the Common App is going to impact our population. But I will tell you, there were a lot of students on that lower right end that's going to be harder to come in that also were Common App students. And it could be because this is the first time we've actually used the Common App. It could be, but it could be that the students didn't show up to a lot of the events that we threw. But when we looked at, likelihood of attendance, we looked, one of the things was, did they come to our event and did they already talk to a faculty member? That put them over in the 10, 9s, and 8s, versus the other side of it, which was if, all they were doing was answering emails and things like that, or responding to emails, but not really interacting with them. Those are the ones that we gave to some of the faculty members to say, look, this is a student that's probably not even on the fence, but go ahead, but we'd like you to take a shot, and then the faculty member dealt with them one way or the other. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, sure. Interesting. Thank you. And Brian, another question for you. I think you alluded to this throughout your presentation, but how much of a culture change is this for an institution? I mean, on the one hand, you talked about these new types of thinking and using predictive analytics in this way. On the other hand, I think you said that pretty much everybody is data-driven across campus. Is there a culture shift or culture change that you have to deal with, or is it kind of a smooth transition? Do you have to deal with that?
Well, yeah, specifically what I said was everybody will say they're data-driven, but not everybody really understands what that means. And so, yeah, this has been a culture shift for this group. And it was pretty much every time you come out for when you introduce these things. James and his group really do walk you through an easy explanation on why this person had a 0.96 versus why this person had a 0.29. And once you start to learn the lingo, and then you kind of take that and put it into, I don't want to call it English, but you put it into things people understand, it gets there. But it takes some time. People will tell you, oh, yeah, I'm data-driven because I've done X, Y, and Z, but not really understood that may or may not have anything to do with what it is that we're doing, which is trying to enroll students and retain students and graduate them. So what I would say is, yes, it was a difficult, it is a difficult thing, and people will question your numbers. Where did you get this number, and how did you come up with 0.96 versus 0.29? What James left out on his last answer was they really do work with you to say, well, these are the things that are significant, and this is why. And I think that probably is the biggest differentiator, in my opinion, on Rapid Insight versus some of the other things. Some of the other products out there are good, and they do tell you a lot of information. But if you get questioned on, well, why is that? Sometimes as a user, it's hard to be able to explain it other than say, well, that's what the product says. This product actually is explained to say this is likely, and likely the reasons why. So that's my answer to that.
Sure, sure. And one other thing, Brian, you had that great example. I think you went through it quickly, but you mentioned at your private or prior institution, there were a lot of recruiting efforts for California, even though you didn't get a lot of students from there, or hardly any. And to paraphrase, I guess it was basically we're doing that because it's the way it was always done. Um, are there other things? You have any advice for identifying things like that that might be, not ideal or not data driven, but it's just the way we've always done them?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we're looking at really closely now is we're looking at how we're offering scholarships and how we have done things a certain way for a long period of time. Now, this is dangerous. What our data shows us is that the more need a student has, the less likely they are to graduate. Retain first and then graduate second, which obviously makes sense. And so we're using the data to do a lot of analytics on, can we afford to lower some of our in-the-door scholarships so that we can offer some more need-based aids, because we know that our need-based students are having trouble getting through that second and third year. And, we're looking and seeing, hey, yeah, the lower the EFC, some of these students are actually making it academically, but then they see that they have a balance and can't re-register. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. But specifically, one of the things I think we're kind of proud of is, when you're dealing with a population of students who are almost looking for excuses not to be there, adding things like, well, you have to keep a 3.5 grade point average in order to keep this particular scholarship. Well, is that really realistic when your entire population has a 3.3 GPA, and you've got students that are already struggling or looking for a reason not to come back, and you take their scholarship away? So we've really done a lot of data analysis on that population to say, all right, well, maybe a 3.5 is a little too steep. Maybe we'll go with a 3.0, or maybe we'll go for a 2.75. And we're in the midst of doing that kind of work right now.
Okay, as you say, yeah, that's challenging work, I'm sure. Interesting, great. We're just about at the top of the hour here. Just out of respect for everybody's time, I'm going to wrap things up here. On behalf of University of Business, I'd like to thank our speakers once again, Brian Terry and James Cousins. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and expertise with us here today. We really appreciate learning from you both. And thank you again to our sponsor, Rapid Insight, for their generous support of our webinar here today. And to everyone in our audience, thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you found today's webinar presentation and discussion informative and useful to you. Producing events like this one is just part of our mission here at UB to inform college and university leaders like you about the latest news and trends in higher ed management. You'll find more coverage about issues such as the ones we discussed here in the pages of our print magazine, as well as in our website and digital edition, through additional webinars like this one, and in our various e-newsletters, which you can sign up for right on our website if you're interested. As I mentioned before, for those of you who would like to share this event with your colleagues, or if you want to go back over the presentation at your own pace, you can access it from our website, where it'll be posted as an archive recording at the URL you see on your screen here. And if you'd like to download the slides, you'll find instructions and a link in that follow-up email, thank you for attending, that you'll receive later on. So keep an eye out for that. Also have a link to where you can find the archive recording. So that is it for today's event. Once again, I'm Kurt Osdurley for University of Business. On behalf of our production team and everyone here at UB, goodbye everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us.